Let's resume. We left off with the tourniquet never had a place in today's venipuncture. Let's see where this goes. Place in venipuncture. So let's begin. Slide number 1. The tourniquet was designed to prevent bleeding to death. Got that? The tourniquet was scientifically designed to prevent bleeding to death. In fact, it was developed during the battlefields of Europe, and people were bleeding to death from wounds. And the fellow invented the tourniquet to prevent bleeding to death. So how did it come to be used in vein access? Well, when bloodletting was started, many people were dying from the bleeding. And so the little guy said, here's a tourniquet. It will prevent bleeding to death. And that's how it came to be used in the first era of vein access. The tourniquet never was designed to dilate a vein. In fact, when the needle was invented and bleeding to death was no longer a threat, the tourniquet should have been put away, but it wasn't. Next slide. They kept the tourniquet because it got harder to find a vein to put that needle into. So the tourniquet now came to be used to dilate a vein. It's better locate the vein. But this dilatation with the tourniquet must be called an artificial dilatation of the vein, because in reality, it's really a forced distension of the vein. That even sounds mean. This forced distension disturbs the anatomy, the structure of the vein wall, and it disturbs the physiology, the function of the venous system. So let's take a look at more detail of that. Go to the next slide. The venous system has a blood pressure, just like the arterial system. And the veins that we're working with typically for venipuncture have a specific blood pressure. The first thing we need to know is that the vein wall has a certain normal of thickness. And vein wall thickness varies throughout the body. But as we start, the normal vein wall appears, let's say, that thick. And think now of a long, skinny water balloon that hasn't been filled with air or water. Normal pressure in that vein is 10 to 20 millimeters mercury. When the tourniquet is applied, as the vein distends, the blood pressure and the vein fills, the blood pressure increases. And when the blood pressure reaches above normal for that segment of vein, the venous system begins to leak. This leakage is called an infiltrate. You've heard them say the IV infiltrated or the injection of contrast infiltrated. Well, the split second the tourniquet is put on, infiltration begins. When the fluid leaks out of the vein, the concentration of the blood components remaining in the blood falsely rise. So in the laboratory world, this is called hemoconcentration, falsely elevated lab results and lab values. So falsely elevated laboratory results result in incorrect diagnosis and possibly incorrect treatment. An infiltration of contrast results in incorrect diagnosis and probably incorrect treatment. And an infiltration of fluids or meds in nursing results in delay in treatment and collateral damage from the infiltration. So the tourniquet causes a forced distension of the vein, an artificial dilatation with side effects. That's got to change. Next slide.